I think you're hot. I got to get with you. Girls that mess me up. Chelsea girls, shut like a buttercup.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sex and the City series. We are moving on to chapter 3. We just got done reading chapter 1 and chapter 2. So be sure to go back on my videos. And if you have not yet heard chapters 1 and 2, make sure you go back so that it does definitely make sense to you. And now we are on chapter 3, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue in this fabulous book, Sex and the City. This chapter is called We Loved a Serial Dater. What could this possibly be all about? Let's find out. You know, well, actually, before, I was going to play like the CD in the background, but I thought it was too much of a distraction, so that's why I didn't want to do that, but never mind. Alright, let's continue. On a recent afternoon, 7 women gathered in Manhattan over wine, cheese, and cigarettes to animately discuss the one thing they had in common: a man. Specifically, an eligible man of Manhattan, a man we'll call Tom Perry. Tom Perry is 43 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall with straight brown hair. There is nothing remarkable about his appearance, save for a penchant a few years ago for dressing in black Armani suits paired with wacky suspenders. He comes from a wealthy manufacturing family and grew up on Fifth Avenue and in Bedford, New York. He lives in a modern high-rise on Fifth Avenue. Over the last 15 years, Perry, who is almost always referred to by his last name only, has become something of a legend in New York. He's not exactly a womanizer, because he's always trying to get married. Perry is, rather, one of the city's most accomplished serial daters, engaging in up to 12 relationships a year. But after 2 days or 2 months, the uneventable happens. Something goes wrong, and he says, "I get dumped." For a certain type of woman, 30-ish, ambitious, well-placed society, dating Perry or avoiding his attentions have become nothing less than a rite of passage, sort of like your first limo ride and your first robbery combined. Even among the city's other notorious ladies, men, Perry stands out. For one thing, he appears to be holding far fewer cards. He has neither the well-bred good looks of Count Eric Westminster, nor the free-flowing cash of Mort Zuckerman. I wanted to know, what's Perry got? Each of the women I contacted had been involved with Perry, either intimately or as an object of his ardent affections, and each said she had dumped him. None refused my request to get together for a session of talking about Perry. Each woman, perhaps, had something unresolved about Perry. Maybe they wanted him back. Maybe they wanted him dead. Like Darvelin Hoare. We met at the home of Sarar, a filmmaker who used to be a model, until I got sick of the bullshit and gave him 20 pounds. She wore a dark pinstripe suit. When you look over the list of guys you've dated, Perry is one guy that doesn't make any sense, she said. You think, what was that about? But before we could even get to the juicy bits, we made a disturbing discovery. Although none of the other women had heard from Perry for months, that morning he had called 4 of them. I don't think he knows anything. I think it was just coincidence, said Magna. Magna had been friends with Perry for years. In fact, most of her girlfriends are former dates of Perry's, whom she met through him. He knows everything about us, one woman said. He's like Daryl Van Horn in The Witches of Eastwick. Van Horny is more like it, said another. We opened the wine. The thing with Perry is this, said Sarah. The reason he's so charming is when you first meet him, he is articulate. He is funny, and he's available at all times. Because he doesn't work. What's more fun than a guy who says, "Meet me for lunch"? Then you go back to work, and then he says, "Meet me for cocktails at 6." When was the last time you went out with the guy who actually wanted to see you 3 times a day? Cocktails is such a loaded word, said Magna. It's like Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. Jackie, a magazine editor, said, when I met him, he started seeing each other instantly. 5 nights a week. He won't leave you alone. He's smart because the thing that he does is he loves the phone, said Sarah. Which to a woman you think, he must really be into me because he calls you 10 times a day. And then you start to disregard the fact that he's like a funny looking little thing. Then you start to look at his suspenders and you think, my God, said Maeve, a poet who is half Irish. Then you begin to realize he's not funny, said Sarah. He has a good stack of jokes, but once you've heard them a million times, they really get annoying. It's like a loop. He's looping himself. He told me that I was the only girl he ever went out with who got his jokes, said Maeve. And I didn't even think they were funny. And then you see his apartment. 25 doormen? What's that about? You wonder why he doesn't just throw out all of his furniture and go to the door store instead. Once he showed me these napkin holders he got. They were in the shape of handcuffs. Like this was how he was going to seduce a girl. With napkin holders. First date, 44. So, how does it all start? Jackie's story was typical. I was waiting for a table at Blue Ribbon, she said. He walked up to me and started talking. He was instantly funny. I thought, oh my God, we're really clicking. But I'll probably never hear from him again. Everyone nodded. After all, hadn't we all been there? He called at something like 8 the next morning, Jackie said. Want to go out to lunch, he asked. He asked you to lunch at 44 the next day? Sapphire, a blonde divorced mom, laughed. He didn't take me to 44 until the second day. While you think he's still funny and clever, he asked you to go away with him for the weekend, said Jackie. He asked me to marry him on something like the 10th day, said Sarah. That was pretty quick, even for him. He took me to dinner at his parents' house on like the 3rd date, said Britta, a tall, rangy brunette who works on a photo rep and is now happily married. It was just me and his parents at the Butler the next day. I remember I was sitting on his bed and he was showing me home movies of him as a kid. He was begging me to marry him. He was saying, see, I could be a serious guy. And then he ordered some cheesy Chinese food. I thought, marry you? Are you smoking something? Ramona sighed. On the other hand, I had just broken up with someone. I was pretty upset. He was always there. A pattern emerged. The women who had dated Perry had all just left their husbands or long-term boyfriends when Perry found them. Or was it they who found him? He's a rebound man, Sarah said. Definitely. It's like, excuse me, are you broken? Let's get intimate. He's the emotional Mayflower, said Maeve. He gets women from point A to point B. You arrive at Plymouth Rock feeling enormously better. His ability to emphasize was a strong point. The phrase, he's just like a girl, came up over and over again. He reads more fashion magazines than most women, said Sapphire, and he's much more willing to fight your battles than his own. He's extremely confident, Maeve continued. I think it's a mistake that when men present themselves as helpless idiots who can't even find their socks, Perry says. I'm totally secure. Lean on me. And you think, what a relief. Really? It's all that women want. Most men don't understand that. At least Perry is clever enough to affect that. And then there's the sex. He's awesome in bed, said Sarah. He's unbelievably great at making out, said Sapphire. You thought he was awesome? Jackie asked. I thought he was awful. Can we please talk about his feet? Nevertheless, so far, Perry seemed to be the embodiment of the 2 things women always say they want most. A guy who can talk and be understanding like a woman, but who also knows how to be a man in the sack. So what went wrong? Perry. Size. 8 matters. It's like this, said Maeve. As long as you're neurotic and crazy, he's great. But once he solves all your problems, he's become the problem. He gets incredibly mean, said one woman. The others nodded. Once, said Jackie. When I said I was a size 8, Paris said, there's no way you're a size 8. You're a size 10 at least. I know what a size 8 looks like, and believe me, you're no size 8. He was always telling me to lose 15 pounds, said Sarah. And when I went out with him, that was the thinnest I've been in years. I think when men tell women to lose weight, it's a diversion from their own lack of size in certain areas, one of the women added dryly. Maeve remembered a ski trip to Sun Valley. Paris did everything right. He bought the tickets, he booked the condo, it was going to be great. But they started fighting in the limo to the airport. They wanted to sit on the same side. By the time they got on the plane, the stewardess had to separate them. By that time, we were arguing about who got to breathe more air, Maeve said. They fought on the slopes. On the second day, Maeve began packing her bags. He said, "Ha ha ha, there's a blizzard outside. You can't leave," Maeve recalled. I said, "Ha ha ha, I'm going to take a bus." A month later, Maeve went back to her husband. Her situation was not unusual. Many of the women ended up dumping Paris, only to go back to the men they had broken up with. But that didn't mean that Paris went away. There were faxes, letters, and hundreds of phone calls, said Sapphire. It was sort of awful. He does have a huge heart, and he's going to be a great guy someday. I kept all his letters, Sarah said. They were so touching, you could practically see the streaks of his tears on the pages. She left the room and returned seconds later holding a letter. She read aloud, "You don't owe me your love, but I hope you'll have the courage to step forward and embrace mine. I don't send you flowers because I don't want to share or demean your love with objects. Not of my creation," Sarah smiled. Alright, where are we? We're at 12 minutes. I guess I could read a little bit more. Okay, this next section is We're Getting Married. Post-Paris, the women claimed they had unfortunately done well. Jackie said she was dating her professional trainer. Magna had published her first novel. Ramona was married and pregnant. Meade had opened a cafe. Sapphire had rediscovered an old love. Sarah said she was happy to be pursuing a 27-year-old boy toy. As for Paris, he recently moved abroad, in search of fresh marriage prospects. One of the women had heard he got dumped by an Englishwoman who had really wanted to marry a duke. He always dates the wrong women, Sapphire said. 6 months ago, Paris came back for a visit and took Sarah out to dinner. He took my hand in his, she said, and he was saying to his friend, "She's the only woman I've ever loved." For old time's sake, I went back to his apartment for a drink, and he asked me to marry him so seriously. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was lying, so I decided to torture him. He told me, "I don't want you to see any other men, and I won't see any other women." I said, "Okay," thinking, how's that going to work? He lives in Europe, and I live in New York. But the next morning, he called me up and said, "You realize you're my girlfriend now?" I said, "Okay, Perry, that's cool." He went back to Europe, and Sarah said she forgot about the whole thing. One morning, she was in bed with her new boyfriend when the phone rang. It was Paris. While Sarah was talking to him, her boyfriend said, "Do you want some coffee?" Paris went nuts. "Who's there?" he said. "A friend," Sarah said. "At 10 in the morning? You're sleeping with another guy? We're getting married and you're sleeping with another guy?" He hung up, but a week later he called back. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" Sarah said. "We're getting married, aren't we? You're not supposed to be seeing someone. Are you?" "Listen, Paris, I don't see a ring on my finger," Sarah said. "Why don't you send me a messenger over to Harry Winston to pick something up, and then we'll talk." Paris never called Harry Winston, and he didn't call Sarah again for months. She said she sort of missed him. "I adore him," she said. "I feel compassion for him because he's totally fucked up." It was getting dark outside, but nobody wanted to leave. They all wanted to stay, transfixed by the idea of a man like Tom Paris, but not Tom Paris. All right, you guys. So that is the end of chapter 3. If you have not, which you should have, listen to chapters 1 and 2 so you could totally understand what's going on. And so this is pretty much the end of the Sex and the City series for tonight. But ladies and gentlemen, I will continue the series I think sometime tomorrow, maybe when I get home from break from work, I'll go ahead and read another chapter while I have time to do that. But otherwise, I will try to do at least a chapter every single day until we get through this entire book. So, thank you for joining me on tonight's series. You guys, make sure you comment, respond to what you think about the Sex and the City series. And of course, I'm closing out with the fabulous theme song from Sex and the City. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Be sure to comment. Let me know what you think. Continue to stay tuned for more chapters during the week. Holla back, y'all.